asking.
Right. No, exactly, John. I think that you make a really good point. If anybody on this or in the community that's listening knows of a master's student that is looking for a project, I think it could be very rich and deep information coming out of this. You know, we have the anecdotal stuff, which is almost case study like with the individual students and such, but yeah, to integrate the data and put that together.
I mean, certainly you have, I think, over 100 students that say they've had some contact. So even just looking at the rest of the data for the group of students that say I've had some contact versus the ones who say I haven't had any personal contact, that would be interesting. And there's certainly a big enough body of data there to glean something out of that.
Right, and in consideration of you know, some of that contact just from hearing the comments from the personal interactions of from the students is that they like going to the SRO to get a sticker, a badge sticker, or when it was the run, hide, defend conversation or the vaping conversation or, you know, those types of things has been their interaction. So it's a broad span. So you make a really good point. There's a lot of information in there.
Yeah, and I don't ask the question presupposing what the answers will be. I don't know, but it would be really interesting to get some of that, I guess, crosstab and Excel speak, you know, of how are these different, the larger subgroups, how are they responding to the more detailed questions, and is it a scattershot or not? I don't know. I'm not presupposing the answer, but I think it would be useful to find out.
Yeah, yeah, and I think the more surface information from these questions will be, I guess my point is that we don't have to wait for that type of analysis to use the information in our discussions about the SRO program itself, right? Continue, sure. Unless you feel we do. So.
Well, no, not necessarily. I mean, we carry on no matter what, but you're showing us information. So I'm just saying how to make the information even more helpful.
Yeah, great.
Can I jump in with a quick question?
Yes.
Steve, how many students do we have that fall into the 6 through 12 grade spans? Do you know?
It is over half our students, so it's probably about 5,000 or so, maybe more. Okay. Because we have about, when I'm thinking about the 6th grade added, we used to not count, you know, the 6th grade in that group, and it was about half of the students were, and I'm talking about data from 5 years ago, but that I know, but it was about, you know, junior high and high school. So it's probably most. So if we're looking at that, if you're thinking about percentage wise, the significance that's where I'm thinking you're going.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was trying to think of the percentage of that population that did respond and what this represents. And then was the link to the survey just sent to every student email address within those grades?
Yeah, I'll have to turn to Lene to contribute to that piece.
Yes, we did it differently this time than we did the last time. So we had it go out directly to the students' email addresses versus their parents. Sorry about that.
Perfect, thank you.
So this was remarkably distributed very evenly, which was surprising. And then here is the answers, responses from the parents. I'm sure we would have had parents that say that they were awesome too if we had another.
Or gamers.
Or gamers, right? This is interesting too. It's actually a higher percentage than I thought. I'm sorry?
I'm sorry. Gamers may become a human subspecies in a few hundred years.
or dominant species, actually. Okay. Here you go. Got a very thin slice. Let me see if I can bring it up. That's neutral. Four people, 4 parents out of 518 had negative interactions of those who responded. Again, we always have to tie that statement on the end of those comments about the statistics and responses of those who responded, because even though it's very significant, 518 is statistically valid and significant with a high percentage, probably somewhere just around 98, and if I'm remembering my statistics correctly, with the percentage that it represents of the parent population. However, those factors that would maybe prohibit or inhibit or self-select out of responding could have certain influences on that to change that that percentage.
Yeah, just as an old probability and statistics production control kind of person, those confidence intervals are only meaningful when you have a random sampling of the population. So as soon as you have a self-selected sample, just mathematically, the meaning is very hard to interpret, and there's not a 98% because it's not a random sample.
I think you just said much better what I was trying to say. Thank you, John.
Every now and then my engineering education comes in handy.
All right. This is their opinion about what the SRO does. And then some additional. We have, let me get that percentage. About a third disagree that schools are safer with SROs on campus. And on the other side, 2/3 agree that they are, well, it looks like 3/4 agree that they are, and then sometimes not sure is a quarter, almost. Oh no, not quite. So a total of 2/3 with these are the combined other areas. So the distraction, it is 26 respondents, or 5% said that having an SRO distracts my child from the work. And then equal treatment from parents, same question. Sometimes is the 28% or 28 individuals, or 5.4%. I feel comfortable. Those that don't feel comfortable are 22 of them, 4.2%. Other than that, it is 23 individuals of 4.4, sometimes not sure and agree. Same question. So I would dig into this even a little bit more. This question, is it that you don't feel comfortable talking about your child about anything, or is it just about this? Okay, so here we go. 112 responses. I'm going to scroll through these, and we'll do the same by getting this information out. Oop, I have to scroll.
So Steve,
Yeah.
I know that we have a couple members that have to get off approximately at 9:30. So I'm wondering if you want to sort of transition to discussion about next steps as far as how and when we'll get the survey results out, and then just maybe inform the city group of and maybe school group as well about when this item is coming before the school board again. And then kind of circling back to, do the representatives from the city and school want to make a recommendation as suggested at the last liaison meeting? And so that would be my suggestion on how we sort of move forward with this topic.
Sure. I do want to hit at least the questions, not necessarily the responses from the staff, because we will get those out. But and then I want Pilar to mention, because this is, this is an important time for this particular discussion. I don't want to just brush over it and, till next time. And get, further direction from this group on bringing it back for a recommendation, possibly to go to the respective city council and board. And we also have, I know that, gosh, I must have seen 15 different reschedules or trying to find a time for the South County Youth Task Force to finish up their activities. And I believe I just did another doodle poll yesterday, Christina. I don't know if you know where that is, but
yeah, Bernice is trying to identify a date, and I think at this point we're looking at the week of October 26th, which would be right before your first November board meeting.
Okay, so that makes, I think that timeline is good. I mean, you just kind of went through that. Your question right there is that if we're looking at that as the goal, as the game, you have, do you have a city council on the 2nd?
So our next city council meeting is November we have October 21st and then November the 4th. But this item isn't coming before the council for, any decision making. There's no changes that our council at this point is looking to make, on our SRO agreement.
Got it. Okay. I totally get that. So the way I would then see the scope of the process would be the recommendation and considerations for the Morgan Hill Unified School Board to consider for possible action. And it could be there would be a variety of possible actions, right? And then all within the scope of the contract and where that would be. So, and if we're looking at backward mapping everything else from November 1st, then our recommendation, and I actually would like Trustee Sullivan and Trustee Horner to weigh in on this piece, to consider that board agenda item on November 1st. And we had talked about that quite some time ago. I just want to affirm that that is where we think that our board will want to go with an agenda item.
Okay, so Steve, you're saying then that potentially then we're looking at having this on our November 3rd agenda with action asking for the board to vote on the issue and on whether we continue the program.
Yeah, vote or not vote. I mean, one choice as an option is to not, and then the program just continues as it is. Or it could be an action to continue, or it could be an action to continue to a certain point, or it could be an action to adjust the contract or request staff to modify the contract, or, like I said, a wide variety, but it would be yes on the first meeting in November.
Okay. And then so then I see then two things. would need to happen then before we get to that point. So obviously this information will be shared with the rest of our colleagues on the board.
Yes.
Prior to that, so they can digest that information before our discussion. And then, I mean, I have a feeling I kind of know where the city's position is. John, are you comfortable having a discussion after the conclusion of Steve's presentation of his data to first have a discussion to then come to a point where we can make a recommendation as a body here to be able to share with the board?
Yeah, so I'll just respond from my own point of view. I can only speak for myself on this. I do not feel this body or the trustees, that we're anywhere close to having had the depth of conversations that we should have to move towards any actions on this area. Now, this is all in the area of school safety, suspension rates, education. This is just one piece of a much bigger puzzle. And I think when these conversations started, the Superintendent Batondo said, the value is more in the conversations than it is in, the thumbs up, thumbs down on a particular program or a particular contract. So as I said at a previous school board meeting, and some of my colleagues have said, I would really like to figure out when's the time we can have a more in-depth, workshop kind of a discussion, possibly hosted as a special school board meeting to bring in various perspectives and points of view. And, how do we do school climate and school safety better, and where does the SRO program fit in that, in my mind, is the big question. And I don't feel like we're anywhere close to being able to give meaningful answers to that a few weeks from now. So my response to the question is no, I don't think action on November 1st is something we are well prepared to do in a way that's meaningful and helpful. That's my opinion. I am very interested in having, and we've had these conversations in these kind of piecemeal fashions, a little bit at this meeting, a little bit at a school board meeting, some at a youth task force thing. It's very piecemeal and broken up into little pieces because of schedule. And I really think, we're going to have to spend some in-depth time with a lot of different points of view there in order to be able to set more general policy direction of here's where as a community we want to go. Here's where we are. Here's how we get better. Here are our next steps. So that's where I'm at on this topic. And to the answer, should we go November 1st, thumbs up or thumbs down on the current contract or a new contract? I don't feel like we're anywhere close to being prepared to doing that justice. So that's my answer to the question.
Okay, no, I understand that. And so that sounds like that's a lot of stuff that we need to decide on our own offline as a board and as, under the school district and that timeline. But then for the purpose behind this committee and for us to be discussing it here, I'm wondering then, we're being asked to possibly make a recommendation from this committee to be able to share with both of the other respective entities, being the city and the school district. So for our committee purposes, are we then closer to a point where we can make a recommendation as a body to those larger entities? And so I'm wondering, like today, after we have some discussion, do you feel like you'll be able to give some sort of an opinion to contribute to our recommendation to share? Or are we going to need another city school liaison committee meeting and to discuss this further before we can offer a recommendation?
Well, from my point of view, and there are 4 of us that are official members, but from my point of view, if we're making a recommendation, my recommendation, and I'm certainly in no position to recommend, on the specifics of the current or future SRO contract. So my recommendation is a whole lot more work needs to be done. And, then in the meantime, we have a contract that's in place through this school year. I certainly am not advocating changing the existing contract that's in place through this school year. So, if you want to put it in the form of a motion, carry on with our existing contract while having the in-depth discussions about what do we do next year. That's something I could get behind. I've talked a lot. I'd like to hear from others.
And I just want to add to your point, John, we have at least one other trustee that was interested in trustees attending some presentations from different community groups or agencies that, and then there was the request by at least, again, one trustee to have a separate special meeting to discuss SROs.
Yeah, I'm put me on the list of those requesters. I don't know if you're referring to me or to someone else, but I'm certainly interested in a special meeting on SROs in the bigger context and with community involvement. So again, if we want to talk about a specific recommendation, I very much am in favor of that.
So in order to be able to help move this discussion forward within this group, so then I'd like to, you know, we'll have a little bit more data to be shared by Steve about staff response. And then we can kind of open it up to more discussion. Then, I mean, maybe I'm presuming Mr. Mayor and Councilmember Carr, since the city's perspective is to not change the program, I have a feeling I know which way, you know, you guys are leaning, but please correct me if I'm wrong. So then I would like to know then, Trustee Horner, what more information do we need here, or what other discussions do we need here before this group can then get to a point where it's comfortable making a recommendation back to the school board?
Can I just jump in real quick, Trustee Sullivan?
Sure.
I just want to clarify that while we don't want to make a change in the formal written SRO agreement between the city and the school, we are very much open and already, you know, sort of in discussions on how to improve the program and how to work even closer with the administrators. And so we, you know, I think Steve as well as Chief and are very supportive of continuing to look at how to sort of continue to mold the program to the needs of the schools. And so while we don't want to change the formal program, the formal MOU, please know that we are very interested in making it as outstanding as it can be.
Thank you.
Wendy, can I jump in?
Absolutely.
Thank you. And Christine, I appreciate that as well. And I think in the report and all the documentation that the chief has provided us over a couple of meetings, it's, you know, it's real clear from what I can see from PD that they do have both the interest in making the program better and more accommodating of needs from school sites, and even have some suggestions on that. You know, I really appreciate the things that John just said as well. I keep asking myself as we go through this conversation, and I've attended the South County Youth Task Force meetings and some of the other meetings that are going on, and I keep asking myself, what's the decision to be made? And I'm not sure I have a good grasp of what the school board is interested in deciding, or even if they understand yet what questions and what decision would come before them if we are to make a recommendation. And so it's hard for me to be super helpful to all of you without knowing what it is that you might one day have to decide. It sounds like we don't have anything to decide right now, but this information is very helpful. We want to you know, jointly find ways to, you know, make sure our kids are as safe as possible, and their families and our faculty and other employees of the school district, as well as our physical schools. And I think we've seen lots of data that says we're doing that part. So I think we have focused heavily on this question of SROs because I think, quite honestly, you all are getting a lot of outside pressure to have a conversation about SROs. And it's been a very important one. We've had the program for a while, and I've learned a ton about it during these conversations. I think the data as provided by both what is actually happening in the program as provided by PD, and then, you know, just these snippets of information that Steve's been sharing with us right here, are, you know, are leaning me to say the program's pretty good and people support the program, and that it is, actually touching kids' lives in a positive way and families' lives in a positive way. That being said, we can always make improvements, and I think that's where the contract comes into play in this conversation. But the whole question of safety and climate on our campuses, SROs are one piece to that. They can be a big piece of that, and they can even drive a lot of that, but there's a whole lot more that goes into there. And as I have listened in on your board meetings and South County Youth Task Force meetings, and a lot of times the conversation starts going into expulsions and starts going into things that the SROs don't even really get involved in or have an impact on. But that keeps getting brought into the conversation about SROs. So I think at some point we need to sort of define how we're going to address school safety, kids safety, climate on campuses, and what are the inputs that go into that. Because I'm afraid that the larger conversation going on in the country right now is going to point to someone with a badge as affecting school climate in potentially a negative way, when none of the data that we have seen suggests that in Morgan Hill schools. And so that broader discussion, I think, is an important one. And I don't think it should be driven by a date. I don't think trying to get before a November board meeting should drive this conversation at all. I think the conversation should drive the date itself. And if there's more data and more conversations that need to go on, I don't know that the board is looking for a recommendation from this group, but if the board is, I think the recommendation should very much be along the lines of, we want to keep what's in place today for at least today, and we think this broader conversation needs to go on. And then I want to make sure that we are sort of all in agreement and are comfortable with where we're getting our information and who is in that conversation. We have said a couple of times, well, where's the South County Youth Task Force and how are they doing on their timeline and when are they going to get information back? I'm curious if you all would find that information valuable, if that's important information. I've attended their last couple of meetings, and they didn't focus in on Morgan Hill. They wanted to talk about all these other issues and then relate it somehow to Morgan Hill. I don't know how engaged the superintendent was there. There wasn't any board members attending. That's why are we really waiting for that kind of stuff? Or do we want to have our own conversation with our school site administrators, with our parents, with our SROs, and really talk about what's going on with Morgan Hill schools rather than, this political movement at a national level. And I hope that's where the board really wants to go with this, and not focus so much on a date of having a recommendation when we're not even sure what decisions are to be made yet.
Thank
If
you
I
for
go back to the language of my youth, I just want to say amen, Larry.
Thank you for your perspective. I will just say that I was under the impression that the board was going to be asked to vote on whether we would continue the SRO program. And so, but Superintendent Patondo, please feel free to, if I am wrong on that impression, or if you would like to shed more light.
We had two particular trustees that had an interest in reviewing whether or not we should continue the program or use the money at their request from community members, and also the question themselves, feeling that the board needed to review that. As other districts and in other municipalities were looking at that, you probably know that San Jose Unified removed the SROs from their schools, and I think Eastside did as well, and then Gilroy did. So we were kind of surrounded by some actions, and so the request came from some community members and staff members and trustees to have the board revisit that.
Okay.
Revisit it, I should say.
Okay.
Okay. So are we ready to move on then? I don't hear any actionable stuff other than continuing on, and then unless I thought I heard John constructing some sort of motion, but I wasn't sure.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of saying if I had to make a motion, it might look like this, but I don't think a motion for this group right now is really appropriate or effective or helpful, is my opinion. But you know, we can go there if my colleagues want to go there. I don't feel like we're in a position. I think, you know, Member Carr summed it up pretty well. And like I said before, the conversation is the value. And, you know, a decision on November 1st, you know, it's interesting what's going on in San Jose Unified, and it's informative, but that doesn't drive, from my point of view, any timelines for us. And you know, we have a contract in place, and I'm certainly not advocating changing the existing contract. I'm very interested in the bigger conversation and where SROs fit in, and you know, how do we all do better? That's really my interest in this topic. I mean, racism and racial disparity are a real thing, and we can't put our heads in the sand and say Morgan Hill is Garrison Keeler's Lake Wobegon and we're all above average. That's not true either, as I've said before. So, but the conversation is a value, and I have no interest in establishing an arbitrary timeline, you know, based on other factors. So I don't think action from this group is timely on this topic, other than, you know, we need to keep digging and keep talking and keep figuring out how to be better.
Right. Well, that last line is the best, and I think that we're doing that, so that's good. So I'm going to skip talking about the interaction with the students, but I'll just leave it to say that as varied as you've seen these responses, we have some varied responses from students too, directly. So, and you know, as I think our society becomes more polarized, people seem to choose teams to be on and then stick to what those positions are. And that's a little bit, it is kind of polarizing as an issue. But our purpose is to focus on what's best for kids, and we'll continue doing that.
Okay. And so all the survey data and then the other information you're going to share in terms of more input from students, can be compiled and shared with this group, and then obviously with the rest of our colleagues on the school board?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right. And so I don't think I see any questions or anything either. And we've talked about this topic for a little while now. So in the interest of moving along on the agenda, let's go ahead and leave this discussion, and we can pick this up again at our next city school liaison meeting when we have all the data and responses that we will be able to look at. So then if I move on to City of Morgan Hill Police Department update, and I do understand that Chief Pelsgrove needed to drop off. So
yeah, and he didn't have any further items under this agenda item, so we're good.
Perfect. Okay. Morgan Hill Unified and the topic of returning to in-person instruction.
Well, this is a very short topic. I think I could introduce Pilar on the instructional piece, and certainly we could talk about the health piece, but most people know the board acted, and certainly feel free to jump in, Wendy and John, on the target date of January 4th as a not sooner than that target date, and maybe your thoughts on that. So first, before asking Pilar to jump in, I'll ask Trustee Horner and Sullivan if you want to add to the board's discussion or report on that at all.
Trustee Horner, did you have any comment?
I don't have a lot to add. I mean, we all know this is an incredibly difficult topic. And as I keep saying, in these many matters, we're faced with trying to make the least bad choices. And everybody's doing the best we can. And hats off to the teachers and families and the rest of the staff that are working so hard every day. And that's you know, and I hope as we come towards the 4th, we'll see, you know, our 15-day pandemic now looks like at least a 15-month pandemic, and who knows what the future holds. So I think, you know, we've set a certain set of expectations out there, but I don't know if even the situation will be there on January 4th that we could bring a majority of our students back. We'll just have to see. Certainly, you know, those with the greatest need, I'm interested in serving first. And how do you determine need and how do you serve them is the $99 million question. But that's kind of my thoughts on the topic.
Okay.
Great. I don't have anything to add. We can continue moving on.
Okay. Pilar, do you want to just give any brief? I know we're crunched on calendar with this agenda, but.
Yeah. Well, good morning, everyone. Number one, Trustee Horner, that was great. Just that last piece that you definitely mentioned. We are engaging in a lot of conversations with different stakeholder groups, really working per grade band, collaborating with the MHFT, the union, just to talk about what does it take, what needs to be in place to be safe versus what needs to be in place to feel safe, right? Two very different things. Through those and we've had really rich conversations lasting well over 2 hours, been talking to the principals. And so we're really just like in gathering data and looking at what all of that means. I think definitely what you just mentioned, Mr. Horner, is that piece of how do we go about still keeping and holding true to our integrity around equity and the work that we're doing moving forward without creating yet another division, another lens of those who need, those who are different and other. Therefore, they come to school first, right? And so that's really been our conversations. What are those indicators for the students who do return? And if as a community, we've said, well, it's the students who are at greater risk of because of special needs, or greater risk because of language acquisition, greater risk because of home life situations, homelessness, whatever those, it's usually going to be those that are not privileged, right? And those that are having other kind of challenges. So how do we go about moving forward with the students that definitely need some additional support without also framing it as such? We are really, really grappling with that right now. And so when you hit on that, that was last night's conversation with the leadership team with all the schools. And so we are talking and trying to figure out how do we do the very best that we can while keeping everyone safe, knowing that the very best that we could do for so many of our students is to be right in front of them. So I don't have any other answers other than that right now.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any questions? Okay, I don't see any virtual hands or physical hands. All right, we will close on this item. Are there any other reports or updates that need to be shared?
Nothing further from the city.
Okay, and topics for future meetings. Any requests or suggestions? Yes, Trustee Horner.
I have a possible one, and that's the issue of demographics and school boundaries. And, you know, now with of course, the state has pretty much told cities, you know, if there's a housing application, you have to let them build it. I mean, it's not quite that extreme, but it's close. But so it would be interesting to understand when developers apply to build things, you know, how much information are we able to ask from them as far as, okay, how many residents are you to school loading and school demographics? And we haven't talked about that a lot in this meeting that I'm aware of, but it's certainly an area of huge overlap, of course, between the city's responsibilities and the school district's responsibilities. Like, where are we adding residents and where will they go to school and what are the consequences of that beyond, you know, there's fees and financials and all that, but I don't know, you know, how to get into that topic, and it's not like super urgent. It's not going to change anything, but it strikes me as an area that might be, you know, worthy of some there might be some value in more conversation and understanding around that, particularly with larger projects. You know, I'll define larger as, you know, something that's going to have 40 or more units, or, you know, some, you know, a house here or there, or a duplex, you know, that doesn't really move the numbers in any big way. But as we're facing some of these larger, you know, 100 or more unit kind of projects, they will naturally have, well, some, like if it's a senior housing, by definition, no students there, right? So where if it is, you know, deeply subsidized housing, you know, aimed at young families, may have a lot more students. So I don't know, kind of, if it's an area that might be interesting for this group, and happy to, you know, put that out to this city staff or school district staff. You know, is that something worthy of our time, or am I just off on a tangent?
I think it's worthy, John. What would be an agenda title for that concept?
So how are new housing developments mapped into school boundaries? You know, might be a very specific.
So new residential development impact on schools? Is that
yeah, on schools, and particularly attended, you know, within a given. So, and I don't know when somebody applies, you know, say I want to build a 300 unit apartment complex, and it is, you know, is there a factor? It's in, you know, this elementary boundary versus another elementary boundary. So you know, large scale residential development and its you know, impact on schools, and is there anything we can do to better cooperate and coordinate and integrate our planning around that? And y'all may already have that nailed and doing a great job, and then it's a very short item. But it's a topic that comes up in other conversations about you know, what are and well, not only the demographics of our schools, but school loading. Some of our campuses are basically full. Some have a lot of capacity, just in generalities. So how does that fit into the question? And again, given that, you know, under current state law, the city has minimal leverage in that regard. So maybe we have leverage at least in asking the question of those that propose things. I don't know what questions are or are not asked. So that's a really long title. Sorry.
Well, I think we got it. I think we just trying to help Michelle and Kelly out.
Okay.
That's a great question. Thank you. Councilmember Carr, I saw you raise your hand.
Yeah, thanks, Wendy. I think that would be a great conversation for us to have, John. But another one, we haven't heard in a while about broadband and internet. John Lane came to us some time ago. Maybe we can revisit or get an update on that, both from the city's perspective and sort of the struggles and how the school district's handling those struggles, and how do we sort of bring that conversation together to help each other out.
Thank you. Yeah, I wrote that down on my list that I'd like to hear an update on the work that you guys are doing with WAVE and where we are with that.
Excellent.
So perfect. Any other requests or suggestions? Seeing none. Okay, it is 9:47, and we can go ahead and adjourn this meeting. Wish you guys all a happy Friday, and hope you guys have a great weekend, and we will see you soon.
Thanks
for
your extra time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Happy Bosses Day, everyone.
That's a thing.